Thank you for the nice introduction and for this kind of invitation. So the title is about an exotic, let's say, application of synchro radiation to try to read inside scroll, very ancient scroll coming from Herculanum that is close to Naples under the Vesuvius volcano. So brief remind, or maybe not remind, simply of the ancient history, the period where we are collocated this papyri is across the first century BC and AD. At that time, the Greece is attached to the Roman Republic that is becoming an empire. This explains why the Greek culture became popular in Rome at that time, and finally our papyri are concerning Greek philosophy, are mostly written in Greek language. So, a few times ago, after the Greek, in a small town, Herculanum, that is close to Naples, Herculanum, a philosophical school is created. Think about that Epicurean school is probably at that time was the most popular philosophical school in Rome, Republic and Empire. This villa, this school were under the guidance of Philodemus of Gadara, and the patronage of this father-in-law of Caesar. So he's a very, very important person for this. So this is not in Rome. This were very pleasant stay for Roman important people. Times after, under the year after the creation of this school, the Vesuvius erupt. This is a simulation of a subplinian, not so strong as the eruption has been. This is done essentially to understand the danger for present Herculanum town if an eruption happened. This is collapsing of the Plinian column. So the column collapse. It's something kind of very fast. It's no lava. It's a flow or gas, stone, small stone, etc. No lava at all. This cover a number of small and medium average city in the Roman Empire. Herculanum, Pompeii, Stabia, etc. Some difference between Herculanum and Pompeii. Maybe some of you visit Pompeii, that is more well known, but think about that Herculanum has been excavated before Pompeii. The main difference is that Herculanum is very close to the volcano, so many of all the pyroclastic flow finally cover the Herculanum. You see, this is old city, this is new city. There are 20-25 meter difference level. This is because of this 7 pyroclastic flow that cover completely and finally seal the town. This is Pompeii. Pompeii is larger than Herculanum, but Pompeii is far away. Pompeii has been finally destroyed because of the wind direction. If wind were in another direction, Pompeii would be safe, for example. So Pompeii is at the same level of the present town. There's no difference. So this explains to you why in Pompeii, that is a medium, even larger city of a Roman Empire, there is no papyri, because papyri is extremely fragile. in Herculano has been sealed. In Pompeii, by sure there were some papyri somewhere, but in 2000 here has been totally destroyed by raining, etc. This to explain you why it is exceptional to find a papyrus that is extremely fragile. It's not so easy. So, times after the eruption, start first archaeological excavation. Think about that this is the beginning of the archaeology, the modern archaeology, starting in Herculano. I say it's the beginning because it's the first systematic excavation. Up to this time were simply to catch nice statues for rich people, no more. With Herculano excavation start a king that excavate for bring a museum, let's say. So it's a systematic excavation. We have written note, etc. It's the first example of a modern, let's say, or beginning of archaeology. Very soon a villa is identified and a first papyri has been found, and 2 years after, I mentioned that at that time the Vesuvius is still erupting, not so high as in 79, but it's in the middle between 21st and 25th eruption after the big one. A villa is found, a library is found in a villa, and this villa takes the name of this small finding that are papyri. If you look in the philosophical transaction of Royal Society, you found the letter of this finding, because this finding has been extremely popular at that time in Europe, but not simple by, what is it? Just to have an idea, this is the villa, this is the main excavation site, this is a map of 19th century. So the villa is a suburban part of the town, front of sea, very beautiful probably, very rich people. Villa, not a simple villa. If you look the statues that have been found are among the most beautiful statues, very well known of the Roman Empire. But anyway, the name of the villa still of these small things that are papyri. What is a Herculanum papyrus? This is a Herculanum papyrus. You can easily realize that the first person found this small piece didn't recognize as a papyrus. Probably the first has been thrown out. But very soon they recognized that there were some special things. They open, and if you carefully open, text, you have no expectation looking at this kind of burn papyrus, but text is inside. This is a column of the unrolled papyrus, mechanical unrolled actually. There is a lot of text inside. Why is this so important? This is the only ancient library we have from antiquity. Simply the only one, there are not other. It's a rich book collection, and think about, it's essentially Epicurean, but you find also other school in this collection. I mean, according to what has been up to now unrolled and studied. It's the only library. The text is totally unknown to us because we know just a small fraction of what has been done in antiquity, what has been copied and recopied by the very good tradition of church, Middle Age, copying and recopying of monk. Finally, we have a lot of things, but is a very, very small fraction respect to what has been produced. And Epicurean philosophy, for some reason, has been not in the top of church preservation. So we have practically nothing about Epicurus before Herculean. The only direct texts we have from Epicurus come from Herculean. It's not neglect. The papyri, for some reason, start polemics. Also our work, unfortunately, but sometimes they pretend that it is neglected treasure. But if you look at some English work done, that is in Philosophical Transaction 1821, something that has been done at the beginning of 19th century, look, this is the most inconclusive and disruptive approach. So there is not a single way to open papyri. It's not so simple as sometimes they can think about. So the opening method over the century has been starting from the most destructive approach you can imagine, cut the papyrus, read the text, and scratch the layer in order to access to the next layer, etc. So we have a papyri that has been completely destroyed by this approach. Actually, we have a drawing, but if you look, this is an ideal case. The papyrus is not so cylindrical. The layers are not so easy to separate each other. So once they scratch, actually, they mix layer by layer. So and we cannot correct this work because this papyrus has been destroyed. This has been one method. The method coexist each other. The better result finally come from this called Piaggio machine, a very slow approach, 1-2 millimeter per day. Think that a papyrus can be 15 meters long. But this has been done for papyrus in a good preservation stage. They start if they were able to unroll slowly by gravity, and they put some organic material here, you can recognize. And finally, for some of them, the work has been done properly. There are a number of other approaches. The last, let me mention, the last approach technologically done, not very far, not very long time ago, is just in 1819. The so-called Oslo method is a biochemical approach using a salt gel that penetrates inside, and finally he expands and should also glue fragments. In principle, these are two pictures of two papyri that come from Herculean, but they were preserved in Paris before. You see this number, the fragment number. So this is the result. Result is problematic, let's say. Starting from a papyrus, you have 1,000 of small fragments, few millimeters, and you are not sure the position of each fragment, each other, so a kind of puzzle in such a way. So this to understand why after this approach everything has been stopped, because it has been considered too dangerous, too destructive. So the situation we found finally is 100 papyri, still preserved in the library, essentially in the library of Naples, sometimes as they were on the shelf of the library. In general, the papyri we have are papyri that were unable to open mechanically. So at least the external parts were glued in some way, so the mechanical opening considered impossible. And the papyri. One question, this is a statement, is a monument of antiquity or books? Because they, when I've been child, I visit the library, they consider as minerals. The person in the library speak about this papyri as a mineral. Finally, they consider as a mineral, not really as a book. Because they lose any chance to read inside. Now, just before to read inside, I will show you something about inks. This is important to understand the work after for the non-invasive reading technique. We study also the ink composition, some very important feature as the ruled lines of the writing, and finally the ink recipe. To this approach, we mix a number of techniques: fluorescence, diffraction, xens, and infrared microscopy. Why? To understand the real ink composition, to fix some point about there were methods or not, can we rely to the recipes found in the books, or we should measure directly? There were at that time no systematic study, no mapping, just rough measurement. So we start to study carefully the ink composition and to fix the problem of the ruled line. Ruled line, the question were for scholar were the characters are the capital character are exactly between two ideal lines. Question were the ideal line were ideal, or there were some ruled line to help scribes to in their works. So we found this a combination of fluorescence and diffraction. There were some line of cristobalite. Cristobalite has the same chemical composition of CO2. So could be a quartz stylus that the scribe used to be guided. Finally, our conclusion is not, because using a present fresh papyrus, we slightly burn. The cristobalite line are more or less the same here as in Herculean one. So there is no evidence of any ruled line. Probably scribe used the fiber to be guided. Ink recipes, the X-ray fluorescence show, look, this is the map of a lead. You can read better than a photograph. It's much more clear. The correlation between lead and character is clearly evident. Where this lead come from, we try to understand. Is intentional or by chance? Is it by contamination? We make a number. We check a number of hypotheses. Is contaminated in water from ink well, etc. But finally, we try to figure out the composition, the real composition. We see this is a fluorescence map of lead, phosphor, chloride, aluminum, sulfur, manganese. This is low resolution. This is high resolution. You see that these three elements are more or less correlated with lead and finally with writing. And probably these are not. But what about the composition? Using XANs, finally, we see that the lead is probably in writing as a kind of lead acetate. And the fit show that we can fit data with a combination of lead sulfide and lead galena. But for instance, we exclude one possibility, the minium that is very popular in Middle Age for red ink based on the lead. So this about the ink composition, and to show that we're using a number of synchron technique, we can figure out not simply the recipes, but even fix some mistake, let's say and finally we show that metal were used in ink at least 4th century than before considered by scholars. This because scholars consider that ink became metallic and became really metallic actually with parchment, but were only carbon-based before on papyrus, except for Egyptian colors, but this is a different thing. Finally, our conclusion is different. There are a small percentage, but there are metal, especially lead, in ink. This actually can help in non-invasive technique. That is our main job. What are the principal difficulties? Actually, it's the chemical contrast. Even if there is lead, the main components are light components. Is a carbon-based that is not very different from the papyrus support. So, using a conventional approach, a normal CT, you didn't recognize characters because they're mixed in absorption. Just to remind you, what is the difference? This is a conventional radiography. Tomography actually is a 3D evolution, but this is conventional approach. Absorption is what you use in a hospital, but, in phase contrast, you can recognize a number of details that are absent in absorption radiograph in such a case. So we move on in tomography, but the principle is the same. Where is the key point of our approach? Is that ink is slightly in relief. This is our first consideration. In projector, it's not very clear, probably, but this is ink and this is support. If you carefully look, you see that there is a slight relief. It's not absorbed totally by the papyrus. So this thickness, finally, is what produced the phase contrast edge between air and ink. This simulation made by TV, a French TV. So finally, the deviation, the small deviation across the profile is what this number is not correct. It's detected because of this extremely small deviation of refractive index that produced the phase contrast. What one can see the face. You know there are interferometer, both a heart for X-ray. You can use crystal analyzer, but you can also simply use free space propagation. Free space propagation, if this beam is coherent, produce fringes that finally is the signature of your phase contrast. It's not so easy to have, for hard X-ray, a coherent source. Up to now, to have a good one, we need to move in synchrotron. In our case, we move on in ASRF in Grenoble. So the first thing to take into account is the thickness of the letter. This introduces the phase contrast. Second question we ask ourselves, can we detect this? We are sensitive or not? So these are our schematic setup. So these are ID 17 and ID 19 we made in both. Monochromatic beam, just rotating and record image and reconstruct. First start. This is the first papyrus we analyzed. It's bird. It came from the Paris collection, but still from Herculane. This is simply in Paris because of gift to the Napoleon by the Naples king at that time. And we analyze a fragment. Actually, it's simplest to analyze. So in fragment, we were able to recognize few words. Doesn't matter what they mean. This piptoi, apoi in Greek, but according to papyrologists. Well, the quality is not so good probably in projector, but anyway, you see that there is some aligned contrast. Even if you cannot recognize letter, there is something that is different from the contrast coming from the fiber of the papyrus. These are documented, very nice. Just to mention you, I have this slide because I need to explain to a colleague what is the phase, where is the phase contrast. This is a section, a cross-section like this of this fragment, okay? This is air. This is air. The air is in gray somewhere. In edge is darker, you see? It's darker than air. In absorption, you cannot tell. Nothing is absorbed less than vacuum or air. This white, black and white contrast, this is darker than air, is a phase contrast fringe. The letters are there. And also you can see this black, this is darker than air, okay? This is a layer. This is a fringes of phase contrast. Letters are there. So for such a reason, are they pretty difficult? Maybe here you can recognize better few aligned letter, word, here also. That is different from the papyrus fiber that is vertical or horizontal. Okay? But this is an important thing. Why the letters are darker? Finally, the letter seems to absorb less than air. That is not possible. But simply the letters are a phase contrast, are not absorption letter. Now we move to the scroll. This is scroll. These are three sections, vertical, horizontal, in the other direction. This is to explain you why it's complex, the data analysis of this papyrus. Look at the surface. It's totally entangled. It's not a simple rolled sheet of paper. This is an animation made by us to explain how to work with. These are cross-section. Finally, you try to recognize and follow a surface. Once you are able to segment the surface properly, you render on the surface, you can recognize letters. So letters are inside, but the data analysis is and still is a big problem for us because of this totally entangled surface. Anyway, we were able to recognize some sequence of letters that mean something that can be beginning, the end of some word. This has been the work of our papyrologists. Well, Greek is one of the first alphabetic language, so we reconstruct an alphabet. And we compare with these are our letters. These are letters coming from an unrolled papyrus, mechanical unrolled. This is the number. So we compare because our papyrologists recognize some feature in this writing. Well, so this, especially this feature in K, in Z, in tau, this decoration look like similar to this alphabet coming from this papyrus, this unrolled papyrus. But I will underline also that the readability of our letter is not, once you properly segment the surface, the readability is comparable to the unrolled papyrus. The problem is data analysis. Our papyrologists guess, compared with this papyrus unrolled, that well, there are some approach on the kind of writing. So, according to their paleographic analysis, these come from the second quarter of first century BC, and probably can be a text coming from Philodemus, so the head of the school itself, as the papyrus unrolled. What we want to do now, from ink, we should move to text. Unfortunately, this is text coming from an unrolled papyrus, but we move on this direction. First thing, data analysis. I show you the difficulties coming from the surface, segmentation. We are working with many groups around the world to improve data analysis, but everybody is welcome. If you have an idea, suggestion, we are totally open to that. We would like to improve technique. We improve technique already, but well, we would like to move to new technique, probably combining fluorescence with tomography. For that, we need detector in order to have enough sensitivity and to be fast enough to record volumes. Finally, we would like to have a compact coherent source. Why not tabletop? Because we have an under papyrus, and we cannot imagine to move all the library to Grenoble or APS to study text. So finally, something should be done. Concerning algorithm, this is a segmentation. Well, I don't know if you can recognize, but this is a projection where the letter can be imaged very well. This is a very beautiful unrolling made by Paul Rose in Cardiff University. It's 20 centimeters long, very long. The unrolling is good. Unfortunately, the projection of text is not so good. But this very, very recent result, not published, I show you, but the Paul Rosin is specialist in unrolling, not in papyri, not in phase contrast. So we are explaining how to image a phase contrast because simply he cut all the negative results, all the fringes finally, all the black part of image. We made some experiments on a phantom papyrus. This is made by us. This is a picture. This is a phase contrast rendering. The quality is very good. The ink is based on our measurement. So this should be pretty close to real ink. And you see that if the surfaces are easy, are not so entangled as our real papyrus, as in such a case, the readability is very good. The problem is not the readability, is to properly segment it. New technique probably will be a combination between fluorescence and tomography. We hope to go in this direction, so a combination of fluorescence and phase contrast. If we can add chemical sensitivity, most of our data analysis problem will be solved. I remember you that the readability with the correlation between lead and ink is very clear, and you can read inside. Something about the villa. This is a reconstruction. This is the real reconstruction. Is if you want to go to California, is in Malibu, Getty Museum. They plan. There is an exhibition next year in Malibu about Villa dei Papiri. There are also our results in exhibition. So, but this is exhibition. This is a real reconstruction of the top of the villa, because the villa finally, when has been excavated, they open air, has been just 20 years ago. They recognize there are 2 more levels under the top level that has been excavated at the Bourbon time 250 years ago. What about an excavated level? This is a real picture of the villa. They excavate only 1/10 probably of the villa, open air, I mean. So there are a lot of things inside that has not been explored. This is a virtual reconstruction. So future perspective is actually we would like to read all the papyri have been found up to now, but the new prospect is also that there are a lot of other papyri, because the most of scholars think that there is other library inside the villa, probably a second one with the Latin papyri that were pretty popular at that time, to have two library, on top level Greek one, and on the bottom level a Latin one. This could explain why we found essentially Greek text and only few that probably were around in the villa in Latin. So if this second library is found, we would like to be ready to read inside without damage. Probably for such for such task, we need some efficient, compact, or tabletop source, because we cannot move all the library to the single. Actually, new excavation, this is a kind of joke, but well, not at all. The Vesuvius still is a very dangerous volcano. According to Church, it's one of the most dangerous in the world, not because it's the strongest, but because there are people living close to the volcano. I'm pretty far, so I don't care, but other million persons should be. this just to show you some picture. This in comics, so this is in French, Le Canard enchaîné, or in English. I don't remember, some New York, I don't remember. These two thanks main collaborator, Emmanuel Brown, Claude Ferrer that died a few months ago, unfortunately. Daniel Delattre, our papyrologist. Thank you.
So, questions for the speaker? Sure.
So I was really happy to see the progress that you guys have made in the last 2.5 years or so. When do you think if everything works out right, you will be able to get the team
Well, everything, I don't know what you mean for everything, because it's a very long work. Taking account that for papyrology, even 3 line is good enough. And we work for 3 line, not for 50 meters up to now. We are working, unfortunately we have not so many founds as we hope to have. So we have some regional founds, but not so much. So the person involved are not, all that other project, myself, other project. So we are slowly working, but we are still working.
So a very naive question in the same way, not being familiar with the papyri. How many lines would a typical papyri maintain? I mean, if you unrolled one of these scrolls, how big is it and how many lines of text would it have?
Well, I don't know the number of lines. I cannot answer. I know practically it's something like this, a papyrus.
Okay, so they're actually
because
not
they
that.
were read by hand, so they open and they close in the other direction. Think 50 meters.
50 meters.
Can be 50 meters. In Naples, the best mechanical opening is a 5 meter continuously unrolled. It's a papyrus, very good, very nice. Anyway, something like this. A letter is typically 3 millimeters. You can calculate.
So there's actually quite a bit of information in one scroll.
Yeah, it's an entire book. To think that all the Epicurus source we have, direct Epicurus, we know essentially, before Herculanum, we know Epicurus from Lucretius, which were Latin author. We found the direct source, direct book of Epicurus in Herculanum. And Ennius, there are a number of authors. Actually, Epicurus is the most important. Taking account that Epicurus, for us, is not the principal philosopher, but at that time, were the principal one.
Right. Other questions? Urchin.
Were there other contemporary libraries at the time where other examples of this type of pattern survive?
No. Taking account that papyri has been found in Egypt in very dry conditions. The papyri is very, very fragile. So you find papyri in dry condition in Egypt, somewhere, but not the library. You find in somewhere, 1, 2, you have not a collection. These are the first papyri found in Europe at that time. After, some have been found in Greece, but individually, let's say. Important, I don't know. But this is the only collection we have, the only library we have. In general, there are not, because of papyri. Papyri is so fragile. Parchment is much more heavy, but papyri is extremely fragile, so they didn't survive. Only in very special condition, typically dry condition, but there are others. Not collection, not library, let's say. Few papyri there are, somewhere in Spain, sometimes burned, because burned, by chance preserved.
Ute.
Your last collaboration maybe with other people working in similar problems? I mean, the consideration that they also more time for forensic research or some people also use it in development
are open to collaboration. We collaborate with people. For fluorescence, finally, we didn't need so many collaboration, but we make a collaboration pretty huge in ESRF with the Belgian staff to recover the composition, to recover the, well, it's ESRF more than double. Actually, well, why not? I mean, the role I show you come from Cardiff University. It's a guy working in other subjects, but, well, we contact him and finally it works. We would like to have other approach. Actually, we try to use approach in medicine, for instance, but the problem is that we can bring some things from other fields, but we need to specialize to our problem because our problem is very specific. But actually we are, well, Emmanuel Brand, for instance, work in medical development, essentially. So actually we are open to other fields, if possible, if they are, we are open. I don't know if they are, other are interested.
Other questions for the speaker? All right. Louis.
What gets excavated in Herculaneum, the area is owned by who? And what's the schedule of the excavation? You hinted at the end. You seem to be that hopeful. You have more excavations.
Well, question is very complex question because first, well, there is, I show you, there is the new town in the top. Okay, Villa has not the new town in the top, so it's not a problem. But to excavate more Herculaneum, you need to destroy the new town. But to excavate the other level of the villa, doesn't matter, it's a question of money. But once you speak with the archaeologists, they are not interested in the Bavarian. So for archaeologists, this is a problem. They ask for, if you excavate more, you need to preserve more. We don't have the possibility to preserve the excavated one. We don't want to excavate, but also because they are more interested to see the town structure, for instance, to excavate the other. There are excavated plains in Herculaneum anyway, but not villa. This simply, I would say, because archaeologists are not interested in Bavaria.
Urchin.
Using the most advanced space contract in the line, very limited access, gives you a very short time window to take data. So what is the alternative? Because there are these kinds of artifacts all around the world. Maybe not this type of scrolls, but things that are available. So what is the alternative for, let's say, people to push the boundaries so that these machines come to the lab and
I think there are two directions. There are development of compact source. I see that there are a number of compact source, at least in Europe, growing up. Compact, I would say, is 10 meters for hospital, for instance, size. This can be interesting. Well, it's not tabletop, but it's not singular, so it can be more local. And actually, I hope that the development will be successful. There are other tabletop developments. I see some result from Emmanuel Brand is developing a speckled tabletop approach in 2D. The image, honestly, are comparable with the synchronous phase contrast. Why not? Actually, it's much longer, etc. But for some sample, or hour is in between, can be an issue. If tabletop show good feature, probably we can install in the library directly. It's not so complex. This is essentially a post-processing. You put Spegel and you combine the Spegel with your data to recover the phase information. It's essentially a mathematical development of the technique. It seems to work, but well.
Okay, any final questions? And if not, let's thank our speaker again for a fascinating session.
Thank you.